It's 7:04 on a Thursday morning, and you're standing at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug with a hairline crack running down one side you've been meaning to replace since sometime last year. Through the window, your neighbor is backing a brand new Audi out of the driveway, third car in 4 years. He raises a hand, you raise one back. Your car in the driveway is a 2012 Civic with 178,000 kilometers on it and a rear bumper that's a slightly different shade of gray than the rest of the body from an accident you never bothered getting matched properly. Your banking app is sitting open on the counter. You glance at it the way you'd glance at a clock, not urgently, not proudly, just checking. $612,000. You close the app, you dry the mug, you drive the Civic to work. Nobody who passed you this morning would guess any of that. It wasn't always this quiet. 9 years ago, you'd have been genuinely embarrassed standing next to that Audi in that driveway. Today, it barely registers. Something in you shifted. Not overnight, not from a windfall, but from one sentence a man said to you almost in passing, a sentence you didn't actually understand until years after he said it. This is the story of how that happened. Rewind 8 years. You're 27. You've just been promoted to territory manager, and the offer letter says $61,000. You read it twice in your car before telling anyone. That weekend, you lease a Mazda. Not because you need one, your old Corolla runs fine, but because pulling up to client sites in a 9-year-old sedan feels somehow like an apology. The lease runs $341 a month. It feels like proof you'd made it. The following month, you put a leather jacket on a store card at just under 25% APR because your coworker Claire has one nearly identical and nobody says a word when she hangs it on her chair, and you wanted that particular kind of silence too. Your checking account most weeks sits under $700. You don't experience this as a problem. You experience it as ordinary. Everyone around you lives roughly this way. Your friend Derek lives at loudest. Derek's 28, works in commercial real estate, and drives a leased 4 Series for $498 a month. He mentions a watch he's saving for more often than a normal person mentions a watch. Derek isn't reckless exactly. He makes about what you make. He's just decided, the way most people decide without ever really deciding, that the money should be visible. You don't judge him for it. You're doing the same thing, just with a Mazda instead of a BMW. One Sunday, your uncle's old business partner comes by for dinner, a man named Nathaniel Cross. He's 76, wears a cardigan that looks older than you do, and drives a 2005 Volvo wagon with a dent in the rear door he's never had fixed. Someone asks, half joking, why a man who once owned 4 hardware stores still drives that Volvo. Nathaniel says, "The car doesn't know what I'm worth. Neither does anyone looking at it. That's usually the point." Nobody really laughs. Nobody responds. You think about it for maybe 10 seconds, and the conversation moves along. But the sentence doesn't leave with the rest of the evening. It sits there, uncomfortable, the way something true sits when you're not quite ready for it. That night, you open your banking app in bed. $290 in checking, $2,100 in credit card debt, nothing anywhere that could be called an investment. You're 27, earning $61,000, and on paper, you're worth less than zero. You don't do anything about it that night, but you don't forget it either. 3 weeks later, you're at Derek's new apartment, a 1-bedroom he mentions has great light twice in the first 5 minutes, and he shows you a photo of the watch, stainless steel, just over $3,800. He's not bragging, not really. He genuinely believes it'll feel different once it's his, the way you believed the Mazda would feel different. You go home and for once actually open your credit card statements instead of ignoring it. $2,100 at nearly 25% is quietly costing you roughly $43 a month for absolutely nothing. You do that math 3 times because you don't want it to be true. It takes another 5 months before you actually act. Even then, it isn't dramatic. You open an index fund account on a Wednesday during lunch, sitting in your car in the parking structure so nobody at the office sees the tab open. You put in $40. That's the entire event. No announcement, nothing about your life looks different the next day, Or the month after that, you cancel the Mazda lease the following spring, eating a $580 early termination fee. It stings, but the math says the lease would have cost $10,900 over its full term for a car worth nothing at the end of it. You buy the old Corolla back from your cousin for $2,700 cash. You set up an automatic transfer, $140 out of every paycheck, before you can see it or spend it. You raise it to $190 once the credit card is finally paid off, 10 months later. This stretch of your life is frankly a little boring. There's no story here worth telling at a party. You're not chasing a hot stock. You're doing the same unremarkable thing every 2 weeks. And the boringness turns out to be the entire mechanism. By 30, your account has quietly crossed $76,000. Nobody in your life knows that number. Your apartment still has the same second-hand couch. Your car still has a warning light your mechanic tells you not to worry about. Then, at 31, a market correction hits. Over 5 weeks, you watch $76,000 shrink to $58,000. $18,000 gone from a screen in the time it takes most people to plan a long weekend. You check the app 4 times a day for a week straight. The first time the drop shows up as a percentage instead of a dollar figure, something in your chest actually tightens. A percentage somehow feels more permanent than a number does. You call Nathaniel, not really to ask advice, just to talk to someone who won't panic alongside you. He says, you haven't lost anything. You sold nothing. The account is smaller on a Wednesday. It won't be smaller forever. And even if it is, forever is a long way from Wednesday. You keep the $190 transfer running through the entire correction, buying at prices lower than you'd seen in 2 years, which feels insane in the moment and only makes sense looking backwards. 7 months after the bottom, the account isn't just back to $76,000, it's at $91,000. That same year, you get an offer, a senior role at a competing company, $84,000 base, plus a $600 a month car allowance, generous enough to lease something genuinely impressive. You take the job. You don't take the lease. The $600 goes straight into your investment account, on top of what's already transferring automatically, and you keep driving the Corolla, now with a small crack in the windshield you've decided not to fix, since $310 to repair it feels like a waste when it still technically lets you see the road. Claire from your old job spots you in the Corolla in a parking lot that fall and asks, not unkindly, if everything's okay. You say everything's fine. You don't explain. There isn't really a clean way to say, I make more money now, and that's exactly why the car hasn't changed, without sounding like you're either bragging or lying. So you just say the car still runs. She nods, and that's the end of it. Here's what nobody tells you about that decision. The $600 a month you didn't spend on a lease isn't just $600. Left alone to compound at a reasonable long-run average over the next 25 years, it becomes something in the neighborhood of $720,000. The lease would have bought 3 years of an impressive dashboard and then nothing at all. The transfer buys a version of your future you can't fully see yet from inside a Corolla with a cracked windshield, which is exactly why almost nobody chooses it. It doesn't look like anything is happening. That's the entire trick. At 34, something shifts that has nothing to do with a raise. One Sunday morning, coffee, one screen, 5 minutes, a habit by now. You notice the account's growth that quarter from the market alone was larger than what you'd personally contributed. Not close, larger. You check the math twice because it doesn't feel real. Your contributions that quarter, $2,100. The market's growth alone, $3,400. For the first time, the money is making more than you are without you doing anything at all. Nobody explains this part well because it doesn't look like anything from the outside. There's no ceremony. You don't feel richer walking into work Monday. But something in the arithmetic of your life has quietly flipped. For 8 years, your labor funded the growth. Now the growth is starting to fund itself, and eventually it'll start funding you. That winter, your transmission finally gives out. Repair estimate, $2,500. 3 years earlier, that number would have meant a credit card in months of quiet stress. Now you transfer it from checking without doing mental math first, without checking a second account to see if you can afford it. You already know you can. The number barely registers. Your partner Elena is there when the mechanic calls with the estimate. She watches you say, "Sure, go ahead," and hang up. "You didn't even flinch," she says. You tell her you used to flinch at $300. Now, $2,500 is a Tuesday. She's quiet for a second, then asks the question that ends up mattering more than either of you realize yet. "So why are we still driving this car?" You don't have a clean answer that night. Eventually, you will. It won't be the answer she's expecting. By 36, the account has crossed $310,000, and the changes in your life are almost entirely invisible to anyone who isn't looking closely. You finally do buy a car, a 2-year-old Accord, paid in full, $18,600 cash, and feel almost nothing doing it. No thrill. It's a transaction, the way buying groceries is a transaction. Derek asks why you didn't get something nicer if you could afford to. You tell him the truth. You can afford almost anything now, which is exactly why you don't feel the need to prove it with a car. That same year, your company offers you a promotion, more money, meaningfully more, plus a boss whose reputation for burning people out precedes him by a decade. You turn it down. It's the first purely financial decision of your adult life that isn't really about money at all. 3 years earlier, turning down that raise would have felt reckless. Now, it feels like the most rational choice you've ever made, because the extra money would have bought almost nothing your money doesn't already buy you, and it would have cost you the one thing money can't buy back, your evenings. Derek takes a similar promotion at his own firm that year. New title, a new lease at $740 a month, and a mortgage that stretches his monthly obligations further than he'd ever admit out loud. You don't judge him. He's chasing the exact thing you were chasing 8 years ago in a Mazda. He's just further into it now, and the stakes are bigger. When your mother's roof needs replacing that spring, $9,800, a genuine emergency by any normal measure, you quietly cover half of it without mentioning at dinner that it wasn't a stretch. She thanks you like it cost you something. It didn't, not really. The gap between what she assumes it cost and what it actually cost is the clearest evidence yet of how far you've come. At 39, your net worth crosses $650,000, and you notice you've quietly stopped bringing up money at all, not because you're hiding it, but because there's no longer a version of the conversation that doesn't feel strange in one direction or another. When old friends stress over a $350 repair bill, you understand the stress is real for them, but you can't fully access it the way you used to. You remember what $350 felt like at 27. You just can't feel it that way now, and pretending otherwise feels dishonest. Derek's lease gets repossessed the following January. Nobody saw it coming, including Derek. His income never dropped. He just kept stacking obligations on top of it, the way people do when the visible version of success is the only version anyone's actually tracking. You quietly help him with a month's rent, the same way your own account grew quietly, and neither of you mentions it again. You realize slowly that the isolation isn't really about the money itself, it's that almost nobody in your life can actually see it, and the few who catch fragments of it sometimes resent what they see. Being underestimated used to feel like an advantage. At some point, it started feeling a little lonely too, financially unreadable to almost anyone who's known you your whole life. Nathaniel never mentioned that cost at the dinner table all those years ago. Maybe there wasn't a clean way to say it, or maybe you had to find it yourself before it would mean anything. It's 7:04 on a Thursday morning again, a different Thursday, 7 years further into the story. You're standing in the same kitchen, holding a mug that isn't cracked anymore, though the old one still sits in a drawer, for reasons you've never quite explained to Elena. Through the window, the neighbor with the Audi is loading suitcases into a different one, newer. He waves. You wave back. Your car in the driveway is the Accord, 7 years old now, paid off since the day you bought it. Your banking app is open on the counter. $1,340,000. You look at it the way you'd glance at the weather. You close the app. You drive to a job you've chosen to keep, not one you're stuck in. Nathaniel passed 2 winters ago. At the small gathering afterwards, his daughter mentioned, almost as an aside, that he'd left behind considerably more than anyone in the family had ever guessed.
quietly in accounts nobody had known to ask about, and in a Volvo with 210,000 kilometers on it that the dealership offered to buy off her for scrap value. You didn't say much that day. You just thought about a sentence from a dinner table more than a decade earlier, about a mug with a hairline crack, and about how the whole story of getting here was never really about the number at all. It was about who got to know it and who never needed to. If this made you think differently about what wealth quietly looks like, hit like and subscribe. There's more of this coming. And I'm curious, is there something in your own life right now you're buying to look successful instead of investing to actually become free? Tell me in the comments. See you in the next one.